What's going on, theory and theology? I woke up around 2 a.m. I wanted to talk about this dream. Not like a dream, like some kind of not like some kind of vision or something, or not some kind of dream as in like goals in life, but a dream that I had last night. Um, I guess a little back context. So, like I talked about before, I've kind of been mostly tuned out of a lot of like social media stuff. Um, but you know, I think I've so basically, I'm not sure if it's relevant that I've been talking about religious topics with people kind of recently. I mean, that's kind of just part of life. I probably always do that. I'm probably always going to do that. But just a little bit of background with the last couple of days. I didn't sleep too well on Thursday night, and this dream happened on Friday night, maybe early Saturday morning. At the moment, it's 2:53 a.m. I woke up around 2 a.m. And Thursday night, I don't think I was able to really sleep till maybe a little after 1:30 a.m. I woke up. I had a snack around that time. I woke up like around 6:30 a.m. on Friday morning, and I was like, no way. Like I had barely gone to sleep. Woke up again around maybe 8. I was like forcing myself to kind of get up. I guess I saw that there was some grocery delivery coming, and then since I had the grocery delivery coming, I was like, well, let me just rest a while because I'm probably not going to sleep in way too late in the morning. I think I fell back to sleep till about 8 a.m. And I went and checked the text, and I saw that the groceries had been delivered somewhere near 7:20, 7:30 a.m. So they'd only been outside like 30, 40 minutes, and it was cold and raining. So I had a tray like on a little table tray, a high up table. Like it's like a little tray that goes on this like stand. It's like removable. It's technically like a tray, but like it almost looks like a little table because it's pretty high up. It's like waist high, and then I put it there. I put that there so that the delivery people wouldn't put the food on the porch, which is it gets pretty wet. But there was a corner area that wasn't wet. But I put the bags on there. Anyways, like I was hoping they'd put the bags on there anyways, which they did do. And then I ended up getting the groceries, putting them away. Didn't really want to cook, so I kind of ate like snacks and stuff for breakfast. But it was like a granola bar, like a protein bar, a mush protein bar. If you know those, they do like overnight oats and stuff like that. And they have a really good protein bar that's like oats and chocolate and all kinds of stuff. Very tasty. Yeah, it's the kind you have to refrigerate. So I had that. I had maybe like a banana and I think some kind of beef jerky. It's like a bison jerky. And I don't know what else, but it was just like snack type stuff like that. Like I was like, I'm too lazy to cook, but I wanted to eat on time, and I had some iron, 25 milligrams of iron and a little bit of OJ. So I did that in the morning, and then I kind of was like, I have an appointment at like 11, so I'll try to rest a little more, and then just like try to do some relaxing stuff in the morning and not really like get up and have caffeine and like power on. I was like, because I'm tired and I barely slept. So that brought me into Friday. I had an appointment at 11. I kind of worked on some stuff. Well, I cooked lunch, baked some chicken and stuff, tried a new recipe around noon, started putting that together. Probably didn't eat till like 1:30 something, 1:45, because it took a while to prep everything and put all the, I had other groceries that came in and had to put those away. And so I was home eating, doing little cleanup kind of stuff, really little, like just tidying up a little bit and like cooking and preparing the chicken and stuff. And then worked on some stuff for a while, and then, you know, caught up with people, like, my phone and everything, and then came home around 7 something, around 7:30 p.m. I ate dinner, well, because I left the house, and then came back, ate dinner around 7:30 p.m., which is really late for me. But I'd already eaten lunch pretty late, like close to 2, so I was like, I don't want to eat like super early. So I ate pretty late, but still like within a decent amount of time. We had like beans and rice and some greens and some breaded fish, and you know, I've been snacking throughout the day, and did some relaxing stuff. I guess in the morning, when I was waiting for the appointment and stuff, I was trying to decide what I was gonna, like, you know, I was like, let me just relax, and like, so I was kind of working on getting my shoulders more relaxed and some breath work and stuff like that. And then at night, I guess it was like, yeah, by night I was pretty, maybe like stressed by night, like kind of just like, I just want to like do my own thing. So I finished watching that movie Match, which I don't really, I didn't really care for it, but I've been watching I've been watching it in portions off and on since like yesterday, I guess, or since Thursday, and you know, I finally finished it, and then caught up with some people online just to kind of tell them, like, hey, this weekend I'm doing this online instead of kind of the usual stuff that I was doing throughout the week, in the past couple weeks, you know, like, because I've been on like more like chat rooms and forums. I'm not really doing like chat rooms, forums, texting, different kind of apps that are kind of more like message wise, but I'm not really, you know, scrolling social media, with the exception of maybe like YouTube. I'm tuned into YouTube and probably Spotify, like podcast related stuff and like video. But I just don't want all the other like stuff. So that brings us up to, you know, when I was gonna go to sleep, I was like, let me just shut everything off around like 8, maybe like 8:30. I don't know the exact time. It was 8 something p.m. And I did a little like working out. I was kind of at it for maybe like almost an hour of like, you know, just some light exercise, like stretching out, like doing kind of like the like physical therapy type exercises, that kind of stuff, and just kind of loosening up some of my muscles because I was kind of like tense from sitting around and stuff, and from not sleeping as well. And then yeah, so I got like brief exercise, did some like push-ups, did some like sit-ups and some leg lifts. It wasn't like intense though, it was just like, just to loosen things up. And then I was just kind of using like the foam roller for a while, but I ended up doing that for like about 50 minutes and put on this like sound bath episode on YouTube. It's like an 8-hour thing, and I was gonna listen to some ASMR after that, but I guess I fell asleep in the middle of that. But you know, I put the times of when I was like getting a little exercise, because I kind of like to track it like whatever I'm doing per day, and I was like, I'll probably sleep better if I kind of get some exercise a little bit, and like, because I was feeling kind of physically tense. And then because I didn't work out on Saturday or Friday, because when I woke up I was completely tired because I didn't really sleep very good. But I basically, you know, was starting to feel pretty relaxed and like kind of dozing off, listening to the sound bath thing, and just kind of like relaxing and doing like a little breath work, but not like too intense. But I fell asleep with the sound bath thing on, and then somewhere in the night the internet kind of glitched. So it looks like it stopped at about almost 3 hours in, which would have been, since I turned it on around 9, that would have been around midnight that it stopped. And then I woke up around 2 with my phone still plugged in, screen still on. The wheel was like spinning on YouTube, and I found it interesting that my phone was on. It was on battery, like low battery, like when you put it on like low battery mode. Because usually what happens when it's in low battery mode, it like the home screen shuts off. But maybe it didn't because the Wi-Fi was still trying to connect. I don't know. Because it was on 5G. And then yeah, I was just kind of sitting there. It was, my phone was just sitting there, and I was kind of just kind of like, okay, that had turned off. Because I was curious when it had turned off, because I remembered going to sleep with it on. But yeah, when I woke up, I was kind of like, you know, get up, turn the lights on, let me write this down, write this dream down, because I'd had a dream, and it was like, at this point, it was like, yeah, like, I thought I heard my mom or someone getting up, trying to like adjust, like reset the internet. That's what I thought I had heard. Maybe that happened, maybe it didn't. I didn't look, I didn't like check, but it could have been like a car's brake squeak. Like, it sounded like, you know, when you open a door, like a squeaky door, it almost sounded like that. So I just assumed that, oh, my mom's probably still up, because it's not out of the ordinary for her to be up at like 2 a.m. It's out of the ordinary for me, but it's not out of the ordinary for her. So I just thought, oh, she's up, it's 2 a.m. You know, like, maybe she was online in her room and then was kind of like trying to reset the internet. But I was thinking too, I'm like, would she have waited that long, like 2 hours? Because it's like, it's been off for like 2 hours, technically, if, you know. And it was weird, my phone was plugged in, and it was still at the yellow instead of the green battery. Like, usually my phone automatically switches to green once it gets to maybe like 80% or something. But it had been charging overnight, so it was definitely at 100% by then. So I was like, that's weird that it's still on like yellow, which is for low battery, and my screen didn't turn off. It's still like, the screen is on, and I fell asleep without putting on a video that I was gonna put on. I just kind of had knocked out by that point. And I fell into this dream that, I don't know, like, so I wrote it down. So now we're like 14 minutes in, but I wrote down this dream. I want to skip the names of the people, but I did write names. But most of the people in this dream, if not all of them, were people that I knew since through church and stuff. I put that I woke at 2:05 a.m., but this note actually started at 2:03 a.m., so I must have been awake before that. I said it's a religious dream. internet was likely off since midnight, woke at 2:05 a.m. And then the people in the dream, there was the pastor, the one that I grew up with, these siblings, these like Filipino siblings, a family friend who's my age, who we grew up like, I consider this person more like a sibling or like a cousin than just like a homie. Another female. I mean, I say people are friends. I mean, these aren't, some of these people I'm not really well, we don't talk anymore too much, but like I grew up with them. So I'd see them like every weekend at the least. So this was like a female friend, my old youth pastor, my mom, the parents of the Filipino friend, the friends that are siblings, and just some other people. So basically, I was, and my phone. Sometimes I've noticed ever since I got this last screen protector, they put on a free screen protector for me. They removed the old one and put on this new one when I got my battery changed out, and I feel like the screen protector is like, I don't know, it kind of messes with some of the sensitivity on the touchscreen, and so there's typos because I was tired typing this, and then the letter O wasn't really working. It wasn't working good, and there were some typos. But basically, I'm gonna try to fill in some of it as I'm reading this. So I was with some people in a dream. We were headed to some form of church-related service. Initially, we were trying to eat some fast food, and that's something. Okay, when I was like analyzing dreams with someone a while back, we kind of noticed that like a lot of my dreams have that theme of like food and religion in them. Like whenever there's like some religious theme, there tends to be like some theme of food involved. Like there's a dream I had before that was like, these are just a couple ones, that was like placed at maybe like an outdoor mega church kind of setting, but like there was like a little McDonald's like in the back lobby. There was another one where it took place at like one of the old churches where I used to go, and they had these kind of little, they had a couple, like they had a campus, but there were like other rooms, like little small buildings dedicated to certain stuff. And in this dream, there was a small building that like, there were a lot of Jewish people using it as like a synagogue, and they looked like they were either, I think they were like Chabad. And then that, like when I was talking about that dream to somebody, I realized, oh shoot, the room that they were using, that little outdoor building, was actually what the church had used as like a food bank. I think they got like, I don't know how they got some kind of permission, or like were able to set up some form of a food bank that they ran out of there to give people like food and canned goods and all kinds of foods and stuff. However, often during the month, like maybe once a month, and I'd only really been in there a little bit, but I did know it was like a food bank. There was like stored canned goods and like, I think maybe books, but I think they were like mostly stored canned goods. They were almost always in there, and then like, I guess on the food bank days they had like some fresher stuff that people could come up and get, like a bag of stuff. And so sometimes when I'd come into church, I'd park in that back, like in real life, I'd park in that back lot, and there would be just people lined up for the food bank, or people from church would get a box or bag of food, which is, it's fine. Like, it was pretty cool that they had that there. But like when I was writing down that dream or talking about it, I didn't notice that that room that was being used as like a synagogue was like, because I was like, oh, that's interesting. There's no food theme in this religious theme dream, and then I was like, oh yeah, oh, it's a food bank. It's the room that the building that they use as the food bank. And so this was another dream where there was kind of like a food theme with a religious theme. Um, and sometimes I don't notice this stuff till I start writing it down, and I'm just like, oh, here's the food and the religion stuff again. Um, and so, okay, so I put initially we were trying to eat some fast food. I think it was like fast food or something. We were ordering from maybe two separate locations. There was a reason we were eating at the same time, either a break during an event or at the end of a fast or something like that. Like, because we were all kind of ordering, it was like we were all kind of ordering our own separate stuff at the little windows. I think I was getting some sort of burger with guacamole, but I don't really remember. And in these dreams, we rarely eat the food. Like I don't remember ever eating the food, but in these dreams, a lot of times we get food, or we're getting food, or there's some process about food, but we're not like sitting down eating a meal. There's just like food connected with it. Um, we were driving either before the restaurants or after the restaurants toward a service, a place where there was going to be a service. Eventually, we arrived at the service. It had already been going on. A lot of people from my childhood church were there. Perhaps we were borrowing this church, or it was a place we shared with like some other kind of like denomination or something. It was later. It was a later time of day, similar to if there was a service after a long lunch that would have ended like after our regular church service, because sometimes our church would have a potluck, and then like it was similar to the time of like, say if you stuck around at a potluck, say if the potluck starts at like 1:30, and then you stick around till like 3-4 o'clock, it was about like that time of day more so. Almost like that golden hour kind of time of day. Um, and when we got inside, there was a lobby um, with some elaborate decorations of all types, dark red carpets, all types of gold and silver types of like adorned. I didn't know if they were artifacts or I'm not sure if they had historical significance in the dream or religious significance, or whether, or whichever. I guess I was trying to say which type of group or denomination actually like owned the building. Like I didn't really know that specifically. Like in the dream, it wasn't like very clear. Like all I knew, I was like, this is not Adventist. Like you never would see an Adventist building that looks like this. It was some other denomination that I don't really think I've ever stepped into any of their places of worship before. But I was looking at it and I was like, this is interesting looking. I was a little intrigued by it. I liked it, but it kind of gave me a feel like, okay, like don't touch anything. This isn't our stuff. Like, and I didn't really understand the significance of what it was, but it was like there was stuff everywhere. Like there was a lot of stuff. It was like these, I guess the best I could describe it, it would be stuff like, not like statues of people, but like items that you could maybe open from the top that would have like a hollow inside maybe. Like I assumed that's kind of what they were, but they were like these different shapes, almost similar to like Cambodian or Indian type of like metalwork, like with all the like really intricate like kind of like little, I don't know, like just little, like if you look at like, it almost reminded me of the shapes of like those kind of temples that you see out of like India or Cambodia, how it has like all these like different textures to it, like not anything that has like a significant like function, but it was like for design, or maybe it had some kind of like significance why it was designed that way. It was something, it was like that, like it was just very like elaborate decorations that seemed like they were valuable, and it was like silver and gold stuff, and like there might have been some stuff behind like glass cases. I don't remember if I saw any like framed pictures or like statues of people or like images of people or anything, but I remember there being like just these things that were almost like vases, or like, I don't know, like some kind of like vessels of some kind, or like, but they were everywhere. They were like maybe like, I don't know, like I don't have a specific picture in my mind, but it's like it would have been as if they were like hanging from the ceilings, and there were like tall pillars with them kind of like mounted up on the pillars, and like they would have been like lining the sides of the walls, and like there would have been tables where these items were like on there, and I wasn't really understanding what it was, and um but that's kind of the best picture I can give of it, is like something that you would maybe, I don't know, take for some kind of like a religious ritual, and like whoever was like having whatever role would probably take something like that and like slowly walk down the aisle holding it and take it up to the front, and like there would be some like blessing with it or something. Like there, it seemed like it had like some kind of significance, but it's not something I've ever come across like in real life. Like the best thing I can think of is almost like when you like, if you if you go to someone's house and they have like a china cabinet, or like, you know, if it's like a house where they have some kind of like, you know, some people, how they have like decorations that are like cultural decorations, how they have like, you know, different like, I don't know, like jars of things, you know, around like on top of like dressers, or on top of like, you know, areas where they want to kind of decorate it and make it look like nice with those sorts of things. It wasn't stuff that's like you would be using this in like your day to day. It's like it was some form of decoration, but I wasn't sure if it had religious significance, and it's not really something that I've seen like in real life. But they were super intricate, like kind of more of like an Asian type of intricacy to them, like an Asian artifact kind of intricacy. Like it wasn't a very Western. Um, I don't know, because when I'm thinking about it in my mind, there's no picture that I come up with that I'm like, oh, this is what they looked like, this is where they were. But in the dream, like in my thoughts, they were there. This place was just kind of decorated with all that kind of stuff. I don't remember the outside, the exterior. I remember when we were driving there. We were in like a small car. It wasn't like a modern car. It was maybe like an old Toyota Corolla from like the 90s, like just a basic car. We were kind of like crammed in there, like maybe like four of us, maybe five of us, including the driver. Like it was like me and some friends just like all like in this car, and maybe there were like two or three cars of us. So we had gone from eating to going to this like building where there was this service going on, and you know, it wasn't like a formal service. Like it seemed like it was like a second service where like maybe it was part of some kind of like spiritual week of some kind, where they had like multiple events and services going on. But this one seemed like it was on the same day as a church day, which would have likely been a Saturday. Everyone was wearing clothing that was from church, but we would have, which is also weird because like usually that church was kind of way more casual. There were people that wore suits to church and stuff, but a lot of the people didn't really wear like like I would wear like business casual, like kind of like the same kind of stuff you'd wear, like maybe like at most I'd wear like a pantsuit that would be like something for work, but if it wasn't something like that, it would be just like some kind of dress shoes, some kind of like slacks that you would wear maybe to work, and like maybe like some kind of shirt that had like collar or buttons, and it was usually like fitted. So usually I would wear that kind of stuff to church, kind of like just like what you'd wear to like an office, like that kind of thing. And the pastor usually he would wear like Hawaiian shirts. He would wear Hawaiian shirts a lot, and because he didn't want people to feel uncomfortable if they came, you know, and everybody's dressed in like suits and dresses and things like that. Like, so he kind of like would usually dress a little casual, but it wasn't like fully casual. So okay, so that's kind of the best way but I was kind of like, I guess when I was in the dream, I was kind of like a little bit like confused, like about why we were there in that building. It wasn't a familiar place, but it wasn't so unfamiliar that we were like lost or anything. It was just kind of like, okay, go into this place, like go into this place. So, but it wasn't our building. It wasn't our church. I don't know whose church it was. It didn't look like any church I've ever been in, but I could tell it was like either another religion or another denomination. This was not like Adventist decoration or like Adventist type of like traditional stuff. It was like some other kind of people used this stuff or had some significance with these types of things, and it was something I don't know about in real life, and I had never seen it in the dream. Like, it wasn't like, oh, like we're in like, I don't know what kind of church it could have been, but like, oh, we're in like a Baptist church or something. It wasn't like that. Or like, oh, we're in like a synagogue. It wasn't like that. It was like some other kind of thing that I'm not familiar with. And so I wrote, we lingered a while. Some of us who had been at the restaurants, we were kind of like lingering. We weren't like rushing right into the service. We were kind of like looking around, like taking our time. Someone was either talking beforehand while we were in the car, or while we were at the restaurant, or while we were in the lobby, like sometime before we actually got like into the service that was already going on. Someone had been talking about some intense type of topic that I didn't want to listen to, just because it was like intense, and I was just like, I just wanted to chill. And it was something related to either the Bible or religion in general, but I don't remember what the topic was. But it was stressing me out, so I didn't engage, but I let the people talking continue, and I tried to mostly just like tune them out, but like I wasn't like requesting like, hey, can we change the topic? And it wasn't like an argument or a debate. They were just like speaking on some stuff. And once we were in the lobby, I didn't feel as comfortable. Nothing was familiar, but the people were familiar. Like, everybody in this dream was somebody that I knew. It's not people that I necessarily engage with now, but like it was all people from church that I was often going to church with. We walked into some side door. The sanctuary was off from the lobby, and we walked in. There was a row behind my mom, where some of my friends walked up the steep aisle. There's like the side aisle, like, so we walked up the steep side aisle, and we walked to the, let's just say, seats. We walked to the seats, and I sat next to possibly either one of these guy family friends. The pastor was speaking, but not about anything deep. It was some type of light, boring topic, so I wasn't interested. The interior of this, so my phone auto-corrected to type sacristy, but I had typed sanctuary. The interior of the sanctuary had like a front stage, like the front of the stage. There's like a stage up front, with a couple steps going from like the ground to the stage. The entire space was somewhat round, so like I don't know how to describe this. So basically, when you would walk, the door that we walked into from the lobby, it was almost like a typical church or religious, like a lot of religious buildings or just general like church type buildings are built like this. How there's like a front door, and then there's a little lobby area, and then there's like a door that leads into the sanctuary. So it was kind of like that. But this lobby had a bunch of stuff in it. Like I said, all those kind of decorative things that had something. They seemed like they had some kind of traditional significance. So basically, if you were to open the door that would have gone into the sanctuary, right away there would have been an aisle on the side with like this carpet. It was all carpeted in red, and the seats were like individual seats that were brown, but like it was steep. Like it was like the way it looked, it was like round on the inside, kind of rounded, almost similar like when you have those classrooms, those lecture halls, where it's like the teacher's up front, but like when you walk in, the aisle on the left was kind of rounded, kind of like around the side, all the way around the back. It would have been like round around the whole outside and coming back to the other side of the far part of the stage. And there would be seats just like going up, like in rows, like to your left. And when you would have walked in, like it would have been like the front of the sanctuary would have been right in front of you, looking forward, and then to your left would have been the stage. So the pastor was on the right. To the right would have been the stage. So the pastor was on the right, kind of like to the right of the door, and then like we walked in and went to the left and kind of like up a few rows. I don't know how many rows, probably like 8, 9, 10 rows. But it was like really steep because it was actually really small in there. It had good acoustics. It was small in there, and it was like round, like kind of like a round shape. It wasn't like a square shape, how a lot of buildings are. And it was like there weren't steps. It was like a ramp kind of thing. And I really don't know how to describe it. But if you just think of, if you were to walk into a lecture hall, for example, and the teacher was on the right, and then all the seats were on the left, and then the rows were going like first row would be on your left, and then you'd walk, if you wanted to go to the second row, you'd walk a little farther to what would have been your left. You'd keep walking like towards where you were originally facing forward. You would have been going more and more to your left, but it was kind of rounded. So basically, and I wrote that, I pretty much wrote that, but so I'm going to read it, but I pretty much said the same thing, but that's kind of visually how it looked. It was weird, like it was steep and it was round and it was small. Like, I don't know how many seats were in there, but most of the people were crammed towards that part that was closer to the lobby. There were some people sprinkled around, but there were mostly people crammed towards the lobby, and the pastor was speaking, but like he wasn't on a mic. It just seemed casual. He was just like right at the front. I don't remember there being like a, what do you call that thing where they put the, like that stand where people put like books and Bibles and stuff on that. He was just kind of talking with nothing in his hands and just like talking about some kind of topic that I was just like this is, like I was kind of not that interested in the topic, but I just don't remember what the topic was. And so Okay. Okay, so the entire space was somewhat round and seemed crowded with all the gold and silver stuff. So this was all, now we're in the sanctuary and there's like all this kind of stuff in there too. A lot of types of decorations, maybe similar to the lobby. I don't recall there being instruments or a sound system or mics on the stage. There was other stuff on the stage, but I don't remember what it was. It might have been like some sort of tables or some sort of like a gate of some kind, or like some kind of like cabinets, or maybe some more of these kind of decoration things. But it wasn't like a normal stage that you'd see at like a Protestant church or an Adventist church or like any mainstream church. It was like some kind of thing. And the room was round, high, steep, almost like, it's not called a stadium style, but I don't know what you call it. I can't remember the name. Like, kind of like a lecture hall, kind of like that. With brown individual chairs and dark red carpets and natural lighting. Possibly no electrical was running. Like, it seemed like just like, it was just like bare bones, but it was like very nice looking, but it wasn't like advanced technologically. Like, it didn't have like all the frills of like a modern day like church. It was just kind of like you walk in and it's like that. Everyone was dressed in church clothing. When I had seen my mom, I wanted to sit with friends instead, so I sat with them behind her row. A couple of us wanted to talk more, which, okay, so just a side note, this is pretty common, like at least amongst my friend group when we were like, because we were in church so much, like it's not like we never went to church. Like, we went at least once a week to the main service, if not multiple times off of that. Like, we would go once a week, if not multiple times, when there were other events and stuff. So it wouldn't be uncommon for us to like be like, I don't really want to like sit in this part of whatever this event is and go like do something else. And it's like we weren't allowed to do any other thing, so we likely would have just been talking, but just not like in the sanctuary listening to whatever it was, because it was kind of like a casual service. People weren't dressed casually. This building clearly was not a casual kind of space. It was not our space. I don't know what we were doing there or why we were in that space, but it was kind of like a small, relatively small, close-knit group. There might have been members from the community there, like, because I can't identify every single person. There were other people, like the people I identified were just like the few people that I remember being in this dream. There were maybe like a sprinkle of other people that I grew up with, but there were also other people there at the service. And so like I mentioned, we had already been eating or going from a restaurant to come to this place. We got there when it was already going on. We didn't really want to stay, so some of us kind of walked out, like not in like a rude way, but that, like I'm mentioning, like with like culturally for us in our group, it's like, because we were in church so much, it wouldn't be like considered disrespectful if like, okay, this is like the fifth service of the week and it's not even really church, it's like some other type of meeting, or like, I don't even know if it was religion based, it was just religious people. And then, maybe it was a meeting, maybe it was something else, and then like we were just kind of like, I remember we were just kind of like walking out, but that would have been normal. Like, we'd done that before, where it's like, okay, we've been sitting here a while, we were just at a church service all day long, we just had potluck with all these people, we just went and ate and did all this thing, and so it's like, let's just go, because otherwise you'd be talking in the middle of the service. So if you're gonna talk, usually it's like, just leave and go talk. So we left, which wouldn't have been considered completely inappropriate, at least if it was this type of thing which is like a casual service that's like optional. It's not considered church. It's part of probably some like religious week, like a revival week, or like some kind of week where you're like focusing, or some few days where you're focusing on something, but it's like you're still gathering and like the pastor's still like talking about whatever topics he's talking about, but like it wouldn't have been like considered disrespectful to just like get up and leave. It was like, well, if you're gonna talk, just go do it somewhere else. And like I mentioned, like we wouldn't have been like on our phones or listening to the radio or like in the car watching TV or something like that. We would have just been talking, because that's all we were able to do, because it would have been Sabbath and we would have just been talking. Like we weren't allowed to do any other thing. So we probably would have been either in the parking lot talking, or in the car talking, or in the lobby talking, but it would have just been conversations. We wouldn't have been interacting with any other kind of like thing. We would have just been hanging out with each other, basically, because that's kind of, at the most, we might have taken a walk while talking. We wouldn't have been doing like any other thing. So I put that, I noticed there was another door. Wait. Yeah. A couple of us wanted to talk more. I noticed there was another door, so I shortly walked down, kind of like down this aisle, past the pastor while he was speaking. So I went kind of like the aisle would have gone like behind the pastor, past the door that I came in. There was another door back behind him on the right side. And I basically was leaving because I just wasn't into the sermon. I was like, oh, like, this is what he's talking about. And I was just kind of like, okay. So I went back into the lobby. There were some people who were in the lobby who maybe were still in the lobby from when we had first come in, and we weren't in that sermon long, like the ones of us who left. And I don't think I left by myself, but I think I just quietly walked out, and maybe like a couple people followed me out, and we were back in the lobby. There were other people who were in there that I knew, but I don't know in real life who I could identify, like all the people who were in there. But let's say there were like about like 7 to 10 people like in the lobby, either still in the lobby, or people who were, some of them came with me out from that sermon, and then there were others in the lobby. And so I was back in the lobby. There were some people inside who I knew. My youth and collegiate pastor, was trying to get my attention and started asking me if I noticed something about all of these decorations. And he pointed out they all had small, like, dome-shaped little, like, cap type of shapes on top of them with, like, crosses on top. And he was talking a lot about these, like, intense religious topics. So I was kind of only half listening, since it was stressing me out that, like, you know, it was something intense that he was talking about. But he asked me if I knew why those decorations and almost everything in the lobby might, what? He was basically asking me if I knew why all the decorations had that little cap on them with like a cross. And then I just was guessing, and I was like, oh, because of the Catholic Church? And he replied something that was like, oh, yes, exactly. And then, like, I kind of woke up at that point, and then I guess the thought that came to my mind that the synagogue of Satan is the Catholic Church. And so, I don't know, that was kind of, like, intense. Like, I don't know, it was kind of an intense dream, even though I wouldn't call it a bad dream. It just was, like, not relaxing, and I'm clearly still awake because I'm just like, okay, like it kind of woke me up enough. So basically, with this dream, I guess some things that kind of came to my mind is, I guess some things that kind of came to my mind. There's, um, there's a visually it was very interesting, and just like familiarity wise, it was very interesting because like, I don't know if I've had a dream where it's like we're having a service at a place that's not typically where we would ever meet. And in the Adventist world, it's just kind of interesting though, because I'm not really part of like going to these services and stuff anymore. But it's interesting that like all the people I was dreaming about that were in there are definitely people who, if this was actually happening in reality during a certain time period of my life, these are likely the people who would have shown up and been there. They were the people who were kind of like often engaged in like the events and stuff. So there were a lot of familiar faces, a lot of people I grew up with that I don't really talk to much anymore. But we were all like interacting, and it was like it was a familiar feel as of like a type of an event, and the people that I likely would have been interacting with, and kind of like the social structures of the groups of the people that like, yeah, we would have likely all been hanging out. We probably all would have likely gotten in a car and gone somewhere. We would not have likely gone to a restaurant on the Sabbath and been purchasing food. That part is like not something that would have been common. Like traditionally, we wouldn't all have been going there doing that. So I'm not sure if this day was actually a church day, but we were all wearing church attire, and kind of more church attire than what we probably on average would have worn. Like usually we don't dress up that much. Like it wasn't formal, but like usually there would have been quite a few other people that were like dressed way more casually than what we were. Like we were all wearing like actual like church shoes. Like nobody had sneakers on, nobody had like flip-flops or sandals on. Everyone had like from top to bottom like something that was more churchy than what would have been on average for us. Like usually there would be some people that were like more casual, or if this was a service that was like post church, post actual church service, like if we had already had a main church service and been kind of now going into this other one, some of us would have changed our clothes into something way more casual or a little bit more comfortable. We wouldn't have been all dressed in church clothes, and definitely we wouldn't have been buying lunch. And if this was like another day of the week, like a Sunday or like a Wednesday or something like that, we wouldn't have been wearing church clothes. We would have been a little bit more casual, like maybe wearing like something nice, but it wouldn't have been like suits and ties and stuff like that. Like, so that was something that was a little off, because like we were more dressed up than what we normally would have been, even for church. Just like as a whole, everyone was kind of dressed up, and usually that's not the case. Usually we're not buying food on the Sabbath, so I don't, in my mind, I assumed it was still Sabbath because of the time of day. It was still daylight, but I don't think, and we had already been together, like like whatever we were doing at that restaurant or at the fast food like places where we were in lines, we had come from some other thing where we were getting food. But I guess not everybody got food. I think some people just went straight to the service, but I don't know what the service was, and I don't remember what the pastor was speaking on, but it was kind of like not a topic that was like worth kind of listening to. Like there was nothing deep about it, or like nothing new to learn. He was just talking about something. It might have been a meeting, where they were talking about like some logistics of some kind of thing that was going on, either with the church, or they were like getting updated about like some kind of event, or maybe it was some kind of committee or people that were like volunteering for some kind of thing. It may have been something like that, or it may have been an actual church service on the Sabbath where we weren't doing like normal types of stuff that would have been happening, or it might not have been the Sabbath. Either way, we weren't at our church. So there were a lot of these weird kind of things. And so when I was thinking about like that thought about like Synagogue of Satan, I guess some things connected to that. Maybe. This is a big maybe. I don't really know. Just some ideas I've played with. Recently I watched or listened to this Terrence McKenna video. It was either 7 or like 9 or so minutes long. It wasn't too long. And recently I listened to it, like, within the last couple days I listened to this. Like, so, it was a video that was talking about, or a talk that was talking about, Jesus, and, the history of Jesus, and, kind of like hit, like literature wise, how things, literature wise kind of related to Jesus, just because like there's not a lot of writing about him in history. I guess post New Testament, there's a lot of writing post New Testament. Like once the New Testament books were starting to be published, that's when you start seeing writings. But there is a gap where it's like there's at least that 40-year or so period, I think, before the book of Galatians. And if I'm not incorrect, I think historically they say that the book of Galatians was the first book of the New Testament written. I don't know if that's accurate, but Galatians was first, but the first book of the Gospels, was it Mark or Luke? But I think they were written somewhere near like the year 40 or the year 60. There were no other writings, at least that I've heard about or seen about. I mean, there were other writings, but I don't know if there were any writings of like Jesus didn't write any books as far as like what I've learned. Excuse me. There are some things like by Marcion and some other writings that, like, I guess if you follow any of the content that David Litwa posts, he kind of posts a lot about the history of Jesus. But it is kind of interesting that, like, biblical canon wise, there's like a gap of at least quite a few decades where there were no writings about Jesus. There's hardly writings from the time of Jesus. There's writings, I guess the Catholic Church talks a lot about Josephus, who technically was a Jewish historian who lived during the time of Jesus. And this Jewish historian spoke about miracles that Jesus had done, or things like that. But I think by that time, the New Testament, at least some of the books, had been written by the time Josephus was writing about Jesus. So I don't think Josephus' writings precede the New Testament writings. The New Testament writings already existed, and then Josephus was kind of like giving his like explanation of like his understanding about Jesus. It wasn't the other way around, where Josephus was writing about Jesus and then after Josephus' writings came like some of the Gospels and like these other books. There are books that aren't in the New Testament canon. There are books that, like, I mean, these were written over a span of like a lot of years. And some of the people, such as Paul, who wrote a lot of the books that modern Christianity follows, he wasn't a disciple of Jesus. He wasn't one of the 12 disciples. He I don't think he ever even met Jesus while Jesus was living. There is that story where Jesus like appears to him, but at that point Jesus had already been no longer living. And so and I don't think there's a record or history that explains, other than the New Testament, that Jesus was crucified. I don't think there's other historical records about him too much, according to this Terrence McKenna explanation. Now, I thought that there were writings about Jesus pre any New Testament writings. I thought that there were. I can't think off the top of my head, though, anything that would have been written before the Gospels or before the book of Galatians in the New Testament. I don't really know what would have been written first. I don't really know what would have been written first. I think in this Terrence McKenna video or audio, they talk about what is his name? What is his name? They talk about, there's somebody named, I guess during that time there's someone named Crispus or something like that, where like the Roman, I guess like it was something in like Roman literature where they stated that like there was Crispus that was upsetting the Jews or something like that, and people take that Crispus to mean Christ, but it's not fully clear. And that is kind of interesting, if that's accurate, that Terrence McKenna says that there's no Roman writings that state that there was this Jesus figure during that time of Jesus being alive for like 30 years that's kind of like creating this like upheaval and like creating all this chaos. You hear that from the New Testament, but there's no historical writings, according to this Terrence McKenna clip, that, you know, and that's something I'd like to see if that's true or not, that there's no writings prior to like 40 AD or so. So it would have been like near, like if Jesus passed around 33 AD or whatever the actual year would have been, and like when he was like near 33 years old and was born like about 33 years before that, you know, in the BC time. So whatever that span was, 30 years before about 33 AD or whenever his death was, after, like, there were no writings right then when he had died. The first writings were like later. And if Galatians was written before any of the Gospels, that's kind of weird, because Paul, I'll talk about the Paul stuff, but Paul was not a disciple of Jesus. He did not meet Jesus while Jesus was living. But I guess, okay, regarding Paul states that he was a Pharisee. Paul states that he studied under Gamaliel. If you look at some videos by Henry Abramson that talk about like Gamaliel or like Paul, there's no Jewish historical record of Gamaliel stating that Paul was one of his students. And so that's kind of interesting. I don't know if Paul wasn't one of his students, but there's no record. There's no record of Paul being one of Gamaliel's students other than Paul stating that he was. I'd have to rewatch some of those videos by either David Litwa or by Henry Abramson. But those are two guys that do a lot of studying. They're kind of like modern guys that are like into history. Henry Abramson, like I've mentioned before, he's not a rabbi, but I believe he's an Orthodox Jew. But he does talk some in his research about the history of the history. So this Terrence McKenna video, if I can find it, I'll post the link. But that video was a little different than some of the other stuff that I've maybe heard, because I'm not. That's one thing I want to know is, one, is there a history? I guess I'm gonna write this down because it's probably stuff I'll look into during the weekend. So like one, like, is there history of based on Terrence? Sorry guys, bear with me. It's like almost 4 a.m. I want to write this down because I don't want to have to try to remember it. I'm not going to remember the questions when I'm up and have time to like actually research into any of this. So based on Terrence McKenna's video, there were no Roman historical writings about Jesus. Were there, I guess the question I would have is, were there historical writings about Jesus prior to any of the New Testament books being written? So those would be my main questions. So yeah, those were some things that were coming to my mind after this dream that I was like, okay, like I did recently watch that thing about like Terrence McKenna talking about Jesus, and then kind of like, I guess they're questioning, like, as a historical figure, did Jesus exist? Because it is interesting, just the history of how the New Testament was written. Like, I guess I always assumed, and I think a lot of people assume, that the Gospels at least were written while Jesus was living, and the disciples, at least the 4 of the disciples that wrote the Gospels, were those disciples that the Gospels were named after. That it was their first-hand account of Jesus while Jesus was living. They were kind of documenting this. That, I guess, historically isn't accurate. That these writings, I guess, first of all, were written decades after Jesus had already passed. And if you think about it, like, his disciples likely would have been younger. I'm not 100% sure, but if you read that book by Rob Bell, called Velvet Elvis, it kind of explains potentially like a theory where it's like they probably would have been like 14. Like, if you think of, like, people didn't live that long, right? And so there were people, these like there are some parts of the story, like say if you think about when the disciples got called to be Jesus followers, some of them were literally working with their fathers as fishermen, working with their fathers. So if their fathers were old enough to be actively working, their fathers were not that old, meaning that they were not that old either. Like if their fathers were, and they're like, if they were still able to do manual labor, they were probably in their 30s, 40s. I don't know how old people live to be, but I don't know if people were living like to be like 100 years old, 90 years old, 80 years old. I think life expectancy on average was less than that. And maybe I'm just assuming, say if their fathers were like 50, they might have been maybe in their 30s. Um, so they may have been like near the same age as Jesus, or they might have been younger than Jesus. Like some theories say that they might have been, some of these followers might have been like closer to 14, 15 years old. Um, I don't really know, but you know when you watch these like old Bible movies, everybody's always like old and gray and like ancient looking, and they all look like super old, or like they look older than Jesus. Like they always want to assume that like everybody's old, but these guys technically could have been teens, they could have been in their 20s, they could have been in their 30s, maybe 40s or 50s. But as far as life expectancy and like people being active, I would assume, if you're living kind of just roaming and kind of nomadic like, but kind of going city to city and place to place, you've got to have some kind of health to you. You're probably not like crippled or like not able to walk and hike all over the place and be like sleeping outside and crashing at people's places and that kind of thing. Like you're probably very able-bodied, I would assume, and very much of like maybe sound mind and body. You're probably not like an 80-year-old person that's like relying on other people to like, you know, make sure that you're getting either carried where you need to get carried or something. Like you're probably not doing that. You're probably I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. Like so yeah, that's one thing I was thinking with related to like Paul, related to Jesus, related to this Terrence McKenna thing. But looking at Paul, that's something that I kind of was interested in because I don't know where it is in the Bible that talks about the synagogue of Satan, but I've been a little curious about the Catholic Church in general. I'm not trying to talk about the Catholic people. I'm just talking about the Catholic Church. Because if you think about the history of Christianity, like originally there were Jewish people, and then there were these other offshoots of some kind of groups of people of some form or another. Nobody was really writing during that time. They were following, some of them were like following Jesus. It sounds like some of them stuck around. A lot of people like to listen to him. Apparently he was healing people and doing all kinds of miracles. But the Council of Nicaea and all these other councils kind of show the history of like the canonization of the New Testament, as well as the thoughts that kind of are now established as like these are very Christian thoughts. So I kind of like the stuff that's like pre all of that, like pre Council of Nicaea, pre New Testament writings, that period of time, like before anything was written, in the documents of the New Testament, any of them were even written. I am more curious about the history of like what happened during the time that Jesus was living, and then what happened after he died, after he died, from the time after his death until the first of the writings were starting to come out. Because there were decades there that are just unaccounted for, that, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why all of a sudden would it be like 40, 50, 60, 70 years later, people, well, it would have been technically from the time of Jesus dying, which would have been like maybe like 33 AD or so. Am I getting that? Because AD is near, like, approximately near when Jesus was born, right? It's not after his death, right? Like, people say AD after death, but it's Anno Domini, like year of our Lord, right? So let me look that up, because now I'm even confusing myself. But it's like, what is AD? What is AD? Latin phrase, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. And so yeah, year of our Lord. So if I look at this weird little calendar that they have, which is completely unhelpful. So they would have said the birth of Jesus would have been between 1 BC and 1 AD. So yeah, it's the birth of Jesus, it's not the death. But people do say before Christ and after death. But it's not really after death. It's not after he was 33 or so years old. It's AD is when near approximately when he was born. And so yeah, so he would have been technically not living at around 33 years old. And then there were no books, even at AD 33, there were no books of the New Testament yet. Some reason the number 40 sticks in my mind. 40, 60, 70, 80, like those types of years, there were some writings that were being developed. So there were at least a few years where there were no writings, maybe up to like maybe 60 or something years, the year 60 AD, which would have been like 30 years or so after Jesus. So, but I thought I heard about something being written around like 40, like as early as like 40 AD. But even so, Jesus would have already not been living. He wouldn't have been 40 years old. He would have been like 30 years old when 30 something years old when he was last living. So at least like quite a few years, like years. That's the part that makes it so interesting, is like people waited years to start writing anything, even if it was 5 to 7 years or like 40, 50, 60, years, or like 30 years, like however many years it was, there weren't writings that were being, at least if they were writing, nobody published it, and I've never heard of it, but there were writings that were coming out that were being composed pretty much right at that time. Like, people were writing a lot of stuff, and then there were a lot of writings that started coming out, but I'm still conflicted about Paul's writings, because like if you follow like how Paul talks about his own history of what he was doing, if he was a Pharisee or ran around with the Pharisees. If he was a Pharisee, he had some beliefs that were different from Judaism, different from what a Pharisee would believe. If he was persecuting and killing Christians, that's kind of nuts. Or if he was part of the process of them getting killed. I don't know if he was like by hand, like murdering people, but he might have been part of like the process of like capturing people, or I don't know exactly. But if he states that he was killing Christians before he had this, I think, was he the one on the road to Damascus? Is that when he got that encounter with Jesus? After Jesus had died, Jesus came to him and like told him something, according to his account. And then he was blind, right? Is that accurate? He was blinded on the road to Damascus, and then he ended up eventually having his vision restored, or his vision got restored, and he then stopped persecuting Christians and started he started preaching and writing. And so a lot of, like, a very large, like, a disproportionate amount of texts in the New Testament were written by Paul. Letters of Paul to these other people, to these other groups, and all these other books. Not all of them, but there were multiple books that were written by him. And so, like, a high percentage of books were written by Paul, higher than any other person, which to me is kind of weird. And then, like, when you read what he says, the stuff that he's usually preaching about in these letters to these churches and these different groups of people who were followers of Jesus, the stuff that he's saying isn't the stuff that Jesus was saying, and it's also not the stuff that the Pharisees would have been saying. He's got his own message. But I guess historically, it's almost believed that, I mean, you kind of hear people saying that, like, Paul was responsible for the development of the Catholic Church. But I guess pre-Catholicism, there was Orthodoxy. And I don't know what there was before Orthodoxy. But even if you look at Judaism, and then you look at Orthodoxy, and you look at Catholicism, and you look at most of Protestantism, they're all four of these are so different from one another. But I would say Protestantism, when you think of like churches and buildings and stuff, they don't really look as similar, I guess, to like, Judaism with synagogues. And there's different types of synagogues and things. But synagogues, Orthodox churches, and Catholic churches. And then I guess I'm kind of interested in the Ethiopian Orthodox churches. I don't know if that was like some of the first types of churches. But they're just very interesting to me, where it's like these early people were, worshiping in a certain way, but they have like a little bit different beliefs. And so, but I guess they claim that they were, the first ones most similar to Jesus' teachings or something, but I don't really know. Because I've always been curious as to why churches aren't really similar to synagogues, and why, like, ritual wise, like if you just think about like the order of service, they kind of almost all have like a similar type of thing. Not all, but like I'm pretty sure that there are churches that don't do things this way, but overall, when you go into a church, there's going to be some kind of music and praying at the beginning, and then from there, there's going to be some type of reading, or more praying, and like maybe some kind of scripture reading, or some form of a sermon or speech of some kind. Maybe some more singing or praying at the end, and then it ends. But whatever it looks like, there's usually that kind of an order. I've only been to a Jewish synagogue once. I mean, they have more, like, structured, like, the more traditional places, I guess, have more, like, structured types of, prayers, and some of the prayers have, like, melodies to them, and so it feels like they're singing. But some synagogues, I guess, they have, like, they do actually sing songs at the beginning, like, kind of like maybe songs with, like, biblical texts in them, or songs that people wrote that are, like, related to, like, the religion or the traditional texts, but they're not maybe, like, word for word. They're kind of more modernized, like, songs, but a lot of it being in, like, Hebrew or translated into English, but from the Bible. Protestant Christians, they kind of have this other, like, a lot of churches have these other, like, because they have these professional musicians that sing songs that are, like, more like modern, contemporary rock kind of music, or like country style music, or folk style music, or gospel style music, where it's like they kind of created these songs, and some of them will be based on the Bible, but some of them are just based on like themes about Jesus, or like love, or whatever. There's like these themes, but they're like more modern songs where they're singing about like just like topics, or like singing about their love for Jesus, or like how we need to love each other, or whatever. But some of it's not really like based in like Bible. It's like these are Christian, contemporary Christian, or like gospel artists that are like creating modern music and then people catch on to these albums that come out and stuff, and they're like singing it. And it's kind of interesting because like you heard some of that in the Grammys with like CeCe Winans, and like there are a lot of people who are like names where it's like they're often in the Christian music world. They have been since I was a kid. They've been kind of big names, and they're still writing a lot of music. And you hear these kinds of musicians, people sing these people's songs in church, but it's not the same. I mean, I'm pretty sure there are more like the less strict Jewish synagogues have those kind of like songs too, that they might sing in their services at the part where they're singing music, where they're kind of doing that too. But I've also seen like footage of some types of churches where they don't even have seats. They just go in and they stand. Some Orthodox churches, I think it was like Russian. I don't know. There's some people, I've talked about them before, so you could find the previous videos. There are types of churches. There are videos of these guys who go, or this guy who goes to multiple types of churches, and he talks to different people, and they kind of show him around, and he sees how the buildings and architecture and like the traditional aspect of it is different from like maybe another type of church, and they kind of explain the significance for some of the stuff in their buildings or on their buildings, or like some of the stuff they do during the service that makes them different from another kind of group. And so there's so much variety of like I think, what were the type of churches, the type of denomination where they say that like the architecture is similar to like the hull of a ship, where you look at the ceiling and it's like, I guess technically the people who used to build like boats and ships, it would be like almost like that. Like when you look up, the structure of the ceiling would look similar to maybe like the whole of the ship, like upside down, like the interior of it, and things like that. Some of them have a little like water, like that water bowl kind of thing. Some of them have like different types of things that they use in the service, like bells and incense and different types of vessels to hold like communion types of things in them. Some of them have just like no pictures of any kind. Some of them have tons of like statues, and they look like idols. People would say they're not idols, but they're idols. I would call them idols. I don't know. But like these big statues, these big like photos or pictures of like saints like lining the walls, just like tons of pictures of saints. There are some people who there's pictures of saints where they kiss the pictures of the saints, or like they'll touch their fingers to their lips and then touch it to the picture. And it's like, I think it's called venerating, like they venerate these like saints. And there's a lot of other traditions that would have a big problem with this. Like, why are we like praying to these saints and like having their images in these buildings and in the sanctuary and kissing them and praying to them, things like that, where it's like, why are we praying to these saints, these idols, these photographs, these pictures, these paintings of these like saints. But the artwork is beautiful. I love the artwork, all the artwork. I like the way it looks. I like kind of like what it signifies and stuff. But it's like some of it's just stuff I was never raised around. Like, we were never taught to pray to saints. We were never taught to pray to Mary. We were never taught to pray like to these people. We were taught to pray to Jesus and end your prayer saying in Jesus' name. I would say Jewish people would have a problem with that, with the praying to Jesus part and ending your prayers in Jesus' name, because they consider it idol worship of a man. So that's kind of the big dividing point, is Jesus to be worshipped. And there are denominations like the Jehovah's Witnesses and just different groups that kind of like don't really believe that Jesus was divine or part of the Trinity, or that he should be prayed to, or that Mary should be prayed to, or that saints should be prayed to. And then there are people who pray to like all sorts of stuff that's not necessarily God or the Trinity. They're praying to all these other things. It's just interesting. I don't want to really knock it, because I know what I would kind of maybe think surrounding that. But I mean, if people want to do that, that's kind of their thing. But I just kind of get curious, because people will say, okay, this isn't idol worship. It's not an idol. It's not, I'm not praying to a man. I'm not praying to a woman. I'm not praying to a person. But they'll maybe like invoke them in a prayer. When they need like maybe special help for like some certain kind of thing, they'll pray to like a certain type of saint to kind of intervene on their behalf. Or even like confessions to like a priest or like some kind of holy father or some kind of religious clergy that like takes confessions, or like a bishop, like in the Mormon church, like they confess to the bishop so they can get that permission to go to the temple. And it seems like it can be an intrusive process. And I've heard people talk about it a little bit on some of these cult related videos where they kind of talk about how potentially it's like not appropriate for like a stranger, or even if it's not a stranger, but like an adult male to be talking to like a female that's not an adult, kind of talking about different types of topics, maybe surrounding sexuality and things like that. Like it just seems like a little like maybe not something that I am familiar with enough to really fully like the idea of it. I think if it's consensual and people want to do that, that's kind of different. But I could see how, I don't know, like it's like, do people need to know? Do people need to know that, like, it's kind of like interesting. Like, I don't know. It's just interesting. I try not to really knock other people's things, because I'm like, if you want to do what works for you, like, who am I to be like, oh, well, historically or whatever, this seems like inaccurate. It seems like they're not following these scriptures, or like there's some flaws here. It's like, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if, to me, what someone else chooses that they want to do with their spiritual walk or their time or their energy, like what they want to do. Like, I feel like so long as people are like, in society, not like disrupting everybody else, like so long as people can stay kind of stay in their lane, I don't really have a problem with any religion kind of doing their own thing, any denomination kind of doing whatever it is they want to be doing. But just like I said, like I don't really want people like overstepping into someone else's piece of life and trying to like disrupt other people. But I do kind of like playing with the ideas of like, okay, what about this? What about that? I do just find it interesting, because it's like you'd think it would be more uniform, that like, I mean, even Judaism is very, I guess there are different ways that different types of Jewish groups that hold services different ways. But I feel like overall, and I could be wrong on this, but I feel like overall in Judaism, because they have like the original Hebrew texts, for the most part, most Jewish people learn to like at least basically read Hebrew. So even if they don't fully understand what they're reading, by the time they're bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, they at least understand the portion that they learned. They understand, how to read the letters, and they could technically still read it. And if they continued to study, they would probably be very skilled at like understanding what they're reading in the original. Christians don't have that. Christians have like who knows how many translations of Bibles now, that it's to the point where it's like it's just, there are some interpretations that are so like childlike and not even accurate, to a point that's, it's like, this isn't even the same. Like, I talked about it before. Like, I remember in our elementary, one of my elementary school classes, there was this Bible called like, I don't remember what it was called. I don't think it was called like the Black People's Bible, but it was like kind of some like urban slang type of Bible where it's like when you would read it, it was like the story, but it was almost like you would have thought like Ice-T or like some kind of rapper would have like written this. Like it was very, I'm not like picking on him. I'm just saying like the way it was written, it was literally written to kind of maybe appeal to like inner city or like urban youth. It wasn't like a King James or an NIV or any of that. It was like, and Jesus said, "Yo, homie." Like it was literally like written like that. Like it was like weird. It was interesting. It was funny, but it was like it was not accurate. And there are other Bibles like that. I remember back when I was in high school, there were these popular kind of Bibles that looked like a magazine. I remember I really wanted one, but I don't know. It was maybe like a New Testament that was like disguised as like a pop culture magazine. So it had all that like glossy design on the outside, and then the pages would have been like, I don't know if they were like magazine like pages, and you'd like flip the pages and they'd be like a magazine, and you're like reading like a magazine kind of thing. And it would be almost like you're reading a magazine. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, but it was like the words were like, it was probably an NIV, or parts of it, or maybe it was just the Gospels themselves, but it was like about the size of a magazine, and it looked like a magazine, it felt like a magazine, and it was basically a magazine. But the texts were still in there. It was like intact. So there are all kinds of Bibles that are like that. I had this Bible that a lot of us had. I think a lot of us got this NIV Bible that had like, I think at the beginning or the end of every every book, or every so often, there would be like a letter to like some kind of letter to the editor kind of thing, where it was like, "Dear Joe, I'm having trouble with, obeying my parents. They want me to do this, but I really don't like to listen when they tell me to do chores." Like, and it would be like kind of like a letter to the editor kind of thing. And then there'd be like, it would like be like an advice column, but there'd be like various topics that like a teen might typically have questions about. And like it wasn't the Bible, like it would, and then it would like refer to different, it would give like an answer like thank you, Cheryl, for writing us, about your problem with disobedience to your parents. It would be best for you to obey them because of blah blah, blah, like whatever reasons that they would state, and then it would have these other Bible verses like refer to these texts in the Bible, like whatever text those would be. It would have like a list of texts that you could read that were like relevant to the topic, just kind of like to reference. But it was not, those types of letters or things aren't like in the actual Bible, but it was kind of like, there were a lot of Bibles coming out in the 90s that were like fun Bibles that were trying to like attract like teens, or like, I remember there was like a Precious Moments Bible, like those Precious Moments, like cute artwork where they'd have like those almost like cherub type like children, like that were kind of like sweet looking and like big, they had big heads. I remember they had like big heads, and like just the way they were drawn was kind of adorable looking, with like puppies or like sleeping on a pillow or something. So they'd have like little Precious Moments, little adorable looking little pictures like in the Bible. Like it's like, I think Precious Moments, I don't really know what, if it was something where they had Bible verses usually attached to the pictures to like attract people to like reading the Bible verses. I don't remember, but there was a lot of stuff like that in the 90s that came out that was like these different versions of Bibles that like had other material in them that was like not biblical at all. or it was like more fun. So it was more approachable to like read the Bible because it was like, oh, there's these fun like lessons or like something that would like appeal to you. They started playing with like different Bible, different ways to like get people to want certain Bibles. It wasn't just like classic, like you open it and there's nothing but words. Like they'd be colorful or like different types of like things that I don't think you would see that really in the 70s and 80s, maybe, but I remember it in the 90s that there were a lot of Bibles that came out that were kind of more appealing to teens. I don't know if they still do that or not. But yeah, I don't really know. But I think that's all I really had to say. I don't really know. There's some stuff I kind of want to look into, but it's kind of interesting that like my mind went to that whole like Catholic Church stuff. And then when I started just like thinking about it, I was like, what about the Catholic Church? Like the history of the Catholic Church? Because like people almost want to make it seem like Jesus was Catholic or something. It's like, nah, it probably wasn't Catholic. And the stuff that the Catholic Church pretty much canonized and what was created, like their Bible canon is different than the Protestant Bible canon. I think the Catholic Church actually has the Apocrypha. I think there are other Protestant churches that have the Apocrypha too, but there are a lot of other denominations that don't have the Apocrypha. I was always kind of taught that there was something wrong with the Apocrypha. As far as like Adventism is concerned, that's kind of more their stance. Is like, it's kind of like a weird book. They'd rather have you reading Ellen G. White than the Apocrypha, probably. But I don't know. I kind of respect the Apocrypha. I kind of like it. It kind of expands on a lot of really confusing things about the Bible, but I think a lot of churches don't like to touch it because it's like a little more confusing, and it has some stories in there that are like a little more confusing, and it is seen like, I don't know, the Adventist church does kind of have a bone to pick with like the Catholic Church. Like they don't hate Catholic people, but it's like you do kind of hear that a lot about like, oh, how they changed the Sabbath and they changed the law. Like there's a lot of like, Adventism tries to go back to some of the other traditional stuff that Catholicism kind of changed, and that Protestantism kept as like these changes. So they try not to really do the Sunday worship stuff, the Sunday church stuff. They try not to do, like, they try not to, avoid like, they don't eat pork or shellfish, stuff like that, shrimp, mussels, that kind of stuff. You wouldn't really see a very traditional Adventist doing that. You wouldn't see them working on the Sabbath necessarily, or the strictest people don't really buy stuff or sell stuff on the Sabbath. So that's everything from like groceries to gasoline to like running errands and doing stuff. You'd prepare for that beforehand, and you wouldn't spend time like after church. Like some of the more modern groups do go as a church group and like eat at like paying like restaurants that you pay to go eat at. Some people have a problem with that. Some people don't. Some people are like, oh, it's community and we need to like fellowship together and go out in the community and like eat together and stuff. And then other people are like, we're spending money and buying on the Sabbath and making other people work. The whole thing about buying things is like, other people are working and you're not supposed to work, so why are you making other people work for you? You're like promoting them working. But then it's also in my head, I'm like, well, isn't that considered charity if you're like actually helping them get paid, if you're paying for stuff? But it is kind of like, traditionally you don't really buy it. You wouldn't traditionally buy stuff. But I've seen that change over time too. Traditionally you wouldn't be watching like secular material or like consuming secular material I've seen that change in my lifetime significantly. People really don't disconnect from that stuff anymore. But when I was younger, like, if you turn on the radio, that better be church radio, or you better change it to classical or maybe jazz, something lyricless, or just change it. Like, you weren't listening to sports, you weren't listening to news, you weren't watching movies unless they were like movies or shows about like religious topics or about Jesus or some kind of nature. You could maybe watch like nature channels. You weren't allowed to watch like sports games or play sports or go to work or, you know, like, a lot of strict people didn't study, like for school they didn't study on the Sabbath, but there were people that I knew that did study on the Sabbath, and they were kind of surprised, like, why don't you study on the Sabbath, you know? Like, you know, they wouldn't put down studying. They would continue to study on the Sabbath. So there's like a lot of stuff that's like very Adventist specific stuff that, you know, a lot of other churches don't really do. They're more like, you know, they haven't like gone back to some of this other kind of stuff. And this stuff is like specifically Adventist. They don't keep the Sabbath the way that Jewish people keep the Sabbath. They kind of have their own version of it, but there is a lot of overlap, but it's not like the same thing. So I've been talking for a really long time, but I kind of might dive into some of this stuff if I have the energy for it this weekend, because it's about to be, well, technically has been Saturday for a while now, but I'm probably going to go back to bed, and then if I feel like it, I might, like, this kind of stuff I like to think about on Saturdays, just because it's like I'm not usually going to be diving into it any other time. So if I'm not doing any other stuff, I'll probably stay home a little bit and look into some of these topics, and then probably hit the beach. If it's sunny, I'll go to the beach today. But it's almost 5 in the morning, so I'm gonna stop. But I'm gonna post this. I'm gonna see if I can find that Terrence McKenna video. Or it's an audio clip though. It's not like a video of him moving around and stuff. But you can see what you think about it. Some of these questions I have, I'll look into it. When I talk about dates and years and stuff like that, don't quote me on that, because I'm so bad with numbers. Like, I haven't looked at this type of topic in quite some months now, and so I get rusty and, like, I vaguely remember stuff, but then I'm like, I'm not fully sure when I say, like, the year 40 AD, 60 AD, 70 AD. I'm rusty on the numbers. It's hard for me to, like, remember. And there are, like, time spans, too, where they're like, this book or that book could have been written during this time span. But I do find it interesting, though, that it's not like Jesus was writing his own gospels, or like other people were writing while Jesus. It's not like there were books in the year 5 AD and like some scriptures, or I guess they would have been scrolls. I don't know if they would have been books, but it does talk about in the New Testament that Jesus was in the synagogue and opened up the scroll of Isaiah or something like that, and was like teaching from Isaiah. But I don't know. I just I'm kind of interested to go back and learn like which churches have which books, because I do think there's something about the Ethiopian Orthodox Church that I was kind of interested in. I think that's one of the earlier Orthodox groups, but I kind of want to go back and find like who was the first Orthodox church, who was the first church, and kind of how are they different, because I know they are different from, if you look at like Adventism or Catholicism or Mormonism or Jehovah's Witness or Baptist Church or Lutheran Methodist, any kind of thing like that. You know, those early Orthodox churches are different. And I feel like, if anything, they would probably be the closest modern thing that we have to, you know, the older traditions, um, but I don't know, because I think their Bible canon's a little different too. Um, David Litwa talked a little bit about like Marcion and all these other writings, so I want to kind of follow up with some of his stuff and see if he's still talking about New Testament stuff, New Testament related stuff. But yeah, I'm gonna log off of here because I'm probably gonna fall asleep again soon. It's almost 5 in the morning. It's like 4:47 a.m. But I was like, well, if I'm gonna be awake anyways, I might as well record because this was kind of a little interesting night that I've had. Um, and I haven't posted some of the stuff I've recorded recently, but let me just post this. All right, guys, thanks for listening.